Welcome back to my channel. I have a ton of material on this subject of rating women, ranging from basic points about what decent people do or don't do, as well as a lot of examples of what can only be called crazy troll logic to justify bad behavior. So I don't expect to cover it all in just one video. So let's start with the basics about what is wrong about rating women. By the way, the same applies to women rating men. Our first question is, what is the justification for publicly criticizing the physical appearance of someone else? Note the two key words in that sentence. One is publicly and the other is criticizing. Telling a woman she is gorgeous or pretty or cute are usually considered positive comments. Sure, some women, especially modern feminists, may complain that they are just being objectified. Personally, I think they're being silly, and I know many women enjoy getting those compliments. Anyway, I can make one allowance for publicly making negative remarks about someone's appearance, and that is when the person you're doing it to is already doing it to others. Sure, it's probably best not to do so anyway, but on the other hand, maybe a little karma is at least understandable. But other than that, there is no excuse for publicly attacking someone based on physical appearance. It's like when I see people going around the internet attacking people for spelling errors, often just typos or even something introduced by spell check, rather than the substance of the arguments they present. If their writing was bad to the point I can't tell what the heck they are saying, something that usually only happens with people who aren't native English speakers, I may point out the problem and ask them to clarify. But it isn't an attack unless I'm going after a person for making such attacks on others, while making such mistakes themselves. I don't mind dealing with people who live in glass houses who are throwing stones. When it comes to physical appearance, some personal opinions should be, in fact, personal, as in private. That is, if you find someone unattractive, keep it to yourself. So, you see, it isn't a valid excuse to say, as Mickey Mouse wrote in a comment, all men rate women and don't deny women rate men. You can have all the private opinions you want. I wouldn't even make a big deal if you were sharing opinions with a small group of friends. It has been said by Mickey Mouse that it is just barbershop talk, as if that makes it fine to spread insults about someone's personal appearance all over the internet. But it isn't like barbershop talk at all. You see, in the barbershop, acquaintances may well talk about such things, but it's still essentially private amongst men who usually know each other. More important, this talk isn't expected to leave the barbershop. If one of the men went around publicly revealing what was said, the other men would not be happy. Criticizing someone's appearance to thousands of people on the internet is not remotely like barbershop talk, and certainly nothing like keeping your own negative opinion to yourself. The excuse trolls use that everyone does it is only mostly true when it is limited to individuals rating others privately. But it's false that everyone makes negative descriptions publicly on the internet where the person you are insulting is more likely to be affected. And there's no benefit to doing so publicly. It certainly isn't good for the targeted person or society. It isn't even good for the troll, though I suppose they take some sort of perverse joy in it. But more on that another time. So let's summarize the options when it comes to ratings. Is it something that would be considered a compliment? Then it is probably okay to say it publicly. Is it something that would be insulting to the person you're talking about? Then it should be kept to yourself, or at most, only talked among small groups of your friends who won't spread it around. Those who publicly make negative comments, in this case all over the internet, are no different than the kid in school who is turned down by the girl he wants to take to the prom, and so he goes around saying she is ugly to save face for himself. Some boys never outgrow that phase. It can be pretty obvious a lot of these guys insulting a woman's appearance don't really believe what they are saying. I'll demonstrate that later with their own words. Ought to be fun. Since I'm going to be dealing with what some trolls have actually said about others, I think I need to deal with an actual poll that was made by one of these trolls to, supposedly, prove his rating is right. Trust me that, when I get to the details, you'll see he has no logic at all, but just self-serving assumptions. First, Here are the words he uses for his numeric ratings. 10 is a supermodel. 9 is gorgeous. 8 is beautiful. 7 is pretty. 6 is cute. 5 is average. 4 is okay. 3 is will do. 2 is a brown bagger. 1 is a double brown bagger. Now let's look at the results of the poll Mickey Mouse actually made on his own channel where he would get the most support. It has a large 700 votes, so a few people couldn't skew the results. However, this poll isn't quite what we need because Mykkie combined categories, so 1s and 2s were combined, likewise with 3s and 4s, etc. So it is just 5 choices. Also, as you will see later, Mykkie does divide them up, so, for clarity, I need to get it back to 10 categories if possible. As it turns out, it is. Not only that, but the calculated numbers almost always only have one option. So this is where the math begins. First, the results as shown on Mickie's poll. 22% rated the Filipina P as being a 9 or 10. 28% rated her a 7 or 8. 32% rated her a 5 or 6. 11% rated her a 3 or 4. And 7% rated her a 1 or 2. To convert it into 10 individual scores, we just need to see if we can consistently follow the existing pattern. That pattern is that as you move either up or down from the 5-6 category of 32%, the numbers should always get smaller. As you can see with these next numbers, it's not only possible to do so, but that there were almost always just one possible way to split the numbers. 10% rate P as a 10, 12% rate her as a 9, 13% rate her as an 8, 15% rate her a 7, 16% rate her as a 6, 16% also rate her as a 5, 6% rate her as a 4, 5% rate her as a 3, 4% rate her as a 2, 3% rate her a 1. With the exception of the 5th and 6th level, the numbers I calculated are the only numbers that fit the existing pattern. Go ahead and try to change any other numbers even by just 1 and the original pattern breaks down. As for level 5 and 6, they can be different. The 6th level must be at least 16% to fit the pattern. The 5th level has to be at least 7%. I just split it to be 16% for both, but it is probably more likely to fit the original trend best that the 6th level is probably higher and the 5th level lower. In fact, the 6th level can be as high as 25% and the 5th level as low as 7%. But I'll leave it at 16% for both. It will still show how ridiculous Mykkie is, but it could be even worse. Keep that in mind. Anyway, this is the version I'll be using for the rest of my analysis. As anyone can easily see, whether you use the original poll of 5 divisions or the 10 division version, only a really small number rate P low. Mike claims P is only a 3, though he's given lower scores too, all the way down to a 1. Yet if you take the total percentages for those rating her a 1, 2, 3, or 4, the total is only 18% from his own poll. Yet 82% rate P as average or above. If we take the expanded 10-level version, only 12% rate P as low as 3 or less. Also important is the average, which is over 6.4. As you'll see soon, Mykkie seems to feel there is some +2, -2 rule that says you can go 2 above or below a rating and still be acceptable. It's silly, but let's go with it just for fun. The first problem is that Mykkie thinks his rating of 3 is the middle ground. Yet we can easily see his own poll contradicts him, especially the average, which would mean the +2 -2 results in a range of 4.4 to 8.4. Before showing his manipulation, let's consider how you can tell when someone is probably not giving their true opinion when they give a low rating. One way is when most people obviously disagree, which we see in Mykkie's own poll. They overwhelmingly give much higher scores than he does. Another way is to see how they change their ratings. This can take different forms. Probably most common would be those who start out saying something like, "She's attractive, but," and then they attack for some other reason. The compliment on her appearance is just to fool you into thinking they are unbiased. However, As days and weeks go by, they change it and start saying things like, I used to think she was attractive, but she's only average. Eventually, they declare she is ugly. That's a pretty clear sign they don't really believe what they say. But another way, which also includes changing the rating, is when it not only keeps changing, but under what conditions. For example, Mykkie is rated P as a 1, 2, 2.5, or 3. But the most obvious problem is that Mykkie is also rated P as a 7. Oh, he didn't use a number, but in talking about her male supporters, he said they were misled by a pretty face. Well, on his chart, pretty is a 7. Why did he change the number so much? Simple. When wanting to criticize men who support her, it isn't very convincing to say they are misled by a really ugly face. So the score had to be high enough to make that criticism of her followers sound at least possible to those who don't listen well. Here's one example.
Guys, stop staring at the woman. Pay attention to the words that she's saying and actually analyze it. And there's men that are just in love with her. They're blinded by her visual.
That's the kind of thing a person might say about an attractive woman, not an ugly one. Now, let's get to the fun, showing the insane manipulation Mike goes through to try to get his poll to support his rating of 3 when it clearly doesn't. Mykkie's first step is to eliminate the top and bottom scores as if they are outliers.
You can play this whole game of just go ahead and remove the 9s to 10s and remove the 1s to 2s. And now we're down in the middle, 7 to 8s, 3 to 8s.
Notice the trick. Mykkie is only eliminating 7% of the lowest scores, but eliminating 22% of the highest. This gives us the following new results in the rightmost column for what's left. Note that the percentages are a bit different because 29% of the total votes have been eliminated, so we need to recalculate what's left to still total 100%. This chart now shows 18% gave P an 8, 21% rated her a 7, 23% gave her a 6, 23% gave her a 5, 8% gave her a 4, and just 7% gave her a 3, including Mike. So even taking out 22% of the top scores, Mykkie's rating still fails. His 3 is the lowest score left and is obviously the lowest vote getter. Moreover, even with all he eliminated from the top, P's average is still a 6, which means a +2 - 2 would cover 4 to 8. Mykkie's score is still outside the range. Oh, and now over 84% rate P as average or above. It would be nice if even people who subscribe to Mike would recognize how absurd it is to not count 22% of the votes, all from the very top, but only eliminate 7% from the bottom. But for those who blindly accept what he says, Mike isn't done yet, not even close. As I just pointed out, the numbers still don't work for him. But what does a troll do? Well, they leave out even more from the remaining top scores. I'll show how he does this in a moment, but for right now, let's just point out what he did. As you'll see, his next step involves also eliminating all those who gave P an 8. This means that every one of the top 35% of votes have been eliminated, but only 7% of the bottom. Again, the rightmost column shows the updated results, and as before, the percentages were adjusted to still total 100% for the votes that remain. So 26% gave a 7, 28% gave a 6, 28% also gave a 5, 10% gave a 4, and obviously, the 9% who only gave a 3 rating are way off from most, and this is confirmed by the average of 5.5. Applying the +2 - 2 standard Mykkie uses means the range is 3.5 to 7.5, even after totally eliminating the top 35% of votes. So Mykkie is still contradicted by his own poll, even after massive manipulation, and 82% still rate P as average or above. But no problem, Mykkie has one more step to apply. He actually declares those who gave a 6 or 7 simply gave the wrong rating. Let's break for a moment and look at his excuse.
How did we explain the fact that there's a problem in the rating scale? Is because guys haven't seen enough of Filipinas. And so if you don't have that enough exposure to it, you're going to have the wrong ratings. Okay?
Get it? He says people give the wrong rating because they haven't been exposed to enough Filipinas to realize how beautiful they are. But those who listen to Mykkie also know he has insisted there is just one standard. Yeah, I know, that's stupid, but that's Mykkie for you. More importantly, he is on record as saying a 7 in LA is the same as a 7 in New York and is the same as a 7 in Manila. That fits his silly claim of one standard, but it also completely negates his claim that if we haven't seen lots of Filipinas, we'll rate P too high. At best, since Mike has said the standard in different places is the same, the only claim you can make is that the Philippines has a higher percentage of very attractive women, but it wouldn't change what a 7 or any other score is. Or, to put it another way, by Mykkie's own system, it might be said a 7 is the same in LA as in New York, as in Manila, but also say that LA has a higher percentage of women who are a 7 or above than is found in New York, and Manila has a higher percentage in LA. But percentages don't change individual ratings. Thus, Mykkie has no justification at all for lowering any scores just because someone doesn't know a lot of Filipinas. Heck, Mike doesn't even know who gave what scores. It could be the high scores know lots of Filipinas. Mykkie always assumes whatever he needs to, even when it is contradictory. But, running with his illogical argument, let's see what he does with it.
So because there is a 2-point spread, a mistake in the poll, you drop it down. So if he's saying there's people out there that's maybe rating her a 6 or 7, okay, well that's just dropped to a what? A 4 and a 5, which is the +2 -2. I rate her as a 3. There's guys that's gonna rate her a what? A 5. I rate her a 3. There's gonna be guys that's gonna rate her as a 1.
Do you see it? Mykkie didn't just change the 6 and 7 scores. He eliminated the 8s without actually mentioning it. The 8 through 10 scores represent 35% of all voters, yet Mykkie has removed all of them. And Mykkie doesn't just drop the 6 and 7 scores, but he drops them 2 levels each. He had to do this to claim his score of 3 is correct, as well as his lower scores going down to a 1. Remember, the 6 and 7 scores represent at least 31% of the full poll. And since the 6 could be 9 points higher, it could be 40%. And he drops these 2 levels after already eliminating 35% of the scores, all from the top. There are no votes left above 5. And that magically is the limit Mike needs to claim his rating of 3 is the middle ground. Mike is either a total idiot who can't admit he is wrong, or he thinks his followers are. Or both. Think about it. A minimum of 66% of votes have been removed or greatly lowered from the top. It could be as high as 75%. Here is the final version of the poll after all of Mykkie's manipulation on the right side. Since it is the same number of total votes as last time, the only percentage changes are found because votes were moved from 6 and 7 down to 4 and 5. We have 53% given a 5, the highest possible score since Mykkie literally removed everything from 6 or above. 38% are now 4s, and only 9% are a 3. Of course, since he has made a 5, which is average, the highest possible remaining score, there is an obvious drop in how many rate P average or above. But even so, it is still over half at 53%. All this crazy manipulation just so he can say his 3 is right in the middle of a 1 to 5 spread. Well, duh, when you eliminate or move a total of at least 66% of the poll from the top, and it may be as much as 75%, it only leaves a maximum score of 5. Yet he's still wrong. Clearly a 3 is not remotely close to the middle. In fact, even after eliminating 35% and dropping another 31% down 2 levels, the average is 4.45. Plus 2 minus 2 gives a range of 2.45 to 6.45. So his rigging of his own poll finally lets his score fit in the made-up plus 2 minus 2 range Mike advocates, but it still leaves his score well outside the average. Now, let's consider an alternative approach. It's much like Mykkie's, on the surface, but makes a lot more sense. When we look at the poll before cuts were made, It is very obvious that there are large numbers of people that rate P very high. You may not agree with them, but that's what we have. As such, when 22% give high scores, you can't just declare they are outliers. Outliers are generally pretty obvious because their numbers are well off the majority and have a far smaller number of votes. Well, where do we see those signs of outliers? At the bottom. At the very least, the 1 and 2 levels, but could go up as high as 4. However, let's just go to 3 and drop all those. That's still only 15%. Nothing like the 35% Mykkie cut out from the top, let alone the 31 to 40% that he dropped 2 full levels. And even though the 9-10 level has lots of votes, let's cut that out too. So that means we have cut out 22% from the top and only 15% from the bottom. I think that's more than fair. That leaves us with 66% of the original voters. We end up with this chart for what's left. We now have an 8 getting 20%, a 7 getting 23%, a 6 being 24%, a 5 being 24%, and a 4 only being 9%. Sure seems that even the 4 is an outlier. Regardless, we now have 6 as our middle number, but more importantly, 6.2 is the average score. So the +2 minus 2 now gives a range of 4.2 to 8.2. That's well above Mykkie's score of 3. Now, I know it's not fun following things that use math as a feature, but if you followed through and are wondering how anyone can be as blatantly biased in manipulating his own poll, trust me, I'm not done with this issue of rating women yet, nor how absolutely ridiculous Mykkie can be. Thanks for watching, and don't let the trolls stop you from speaking out.